Let's talk block number 8, year number 8, team strength. Practice 1, we got back squat, heels elevated. This is an 8x8 density-based strategy. So the thing you got to think about is I'm going to get 8 reps done with as minimal rest in between as possible. So when you start to get to that point of fatigue or building up a lot of acidity or fatigue in a certain muscle group like a quad, you want to figure out what's going to be the amendment, right? So when we get to the fatigue of a certain muscle group, we try to find a mechanical advantage, right? So in that case, it would be trying to shift my weight back, taking tension off my quad to use more of my posterior chain. We want to avoid that by keeping ourselves in that upright position, pushing our knees forward, sitting our butt straight down. So the cue you'll hear us a lot say will be eyes straight ahead, knuckles pointed up, elbows pointed down. And what this is kind of giving you an indication of where your torso is in space, right? That's your GPS of, am I going to get to the right outcome of creating a lot of mechanical breakdown and fatigue in this quadricep to encourage it to grow, become more capable, to develop overall fitness. Because when we start to amend that movement pattern, we limit the actual outcome that we're supposed to get from that. So when we set up wise, we want a high shelf. So I tell everybody, try to go about thumb grip away from the smooth, much like you would get set up on a bench press. From here, bar goes right below the line of the neck, top part of your trap, knuckles pointed up, elbows pointed straight ahead. Normally you'd be facing the rack. I'm just doing this so you can see me on film. But the movement is now just touching your elbows down to the ground with your eyes straight ahead. That's probably the easiest way you can make your way through it. And then when you're going up and down, you start to get to that fatigue set. All right, now I'm really, really tired. I'm gonna go down, maybe have a rep where I push my butt back and drop my chest. You wanna think about, okay, now I wanna keep my chest up, knuckles up, use my tools I can to maintain that position. That when we alter technique, we're taking away from the value of that set and rep and exercise. So when we think about how do I control, you wanna manage that by improving your focus and energy towards doing it correctly and choosing a weight you can sustain. Let's move on to practice 2. For practice 2, we're going to do chin up. So that's a supinated grip or palms facing your face. When we go up, what we're looking at, so if we're looking at our arm, this would be externally rotating our humerus. This would be internally rotating our humerus. So when I start to get into a supinated position, I'm externally rotated and flexed in that shoulder. That's a lot of stretch, right? So if I look at now, I'm internally rotated, externally rotated, it pulls on that lat just a little bit more. So when we're going through that stretch on the way down, pushing our head through, getting our chin above the bar, you'll probably feel fatigue a lot more. Again, this is the big reason, right? We want to encourage a greater length during more hypertrophy focused blocks, because what that does, it creates more of the desired effect. So as I go up and down and pulling, we want to really accentuate whatever it is that we're trying to do. Now, from a amendment standpoint, just like we talked about practice 1, we're going to adjust our position by pulling our rib cage up and then bringing our body forward, much like we would try to do in an inverted row or lift up. And what that's doing is changing my center of mass there and taking that stretch away. We want to stay as vertical as possible and pull our elbows behind us, trying to elbow the person in front of us. So when we're going through the exercise, think one elbow locked at the bottom, chin above the bar at the top. But then as we're going through, fatigue will set in. We'll start to lift our rib cage and trying to pull our body forward. Think I'm just trying to elbow that person behind me and keeping my rib cage down. So setup wise, we'll grab onto the chin up bar. We're gonna pull, head through at the bottom, every single rep. 8x8, 8x4, depending on your capability. Fight like hell to keep your ribs down, pull that elbow all the way back behind you, trying to elbow that person, and then a good rep would be locking out at the top. We're on practice 3, and we're gonna do 8x8 on trap bar deadlift. Normal high handle. What we're gonna find here is we're gonna initiate with a concentric, meaning that we're gonna come from the ground up. And what that leads to is adjusting our spine position, adjusting the rate of our hip and our torso movement. When we start to become fatigued, and this is going to be different than a squat or a chin up, that we're using more of the total lower body, potentially more of that hip and low back. You're going to find that point that, okay, now I'm under a fatigue, I'm at a certain load or intensity, and I'm at a certain range of motion from the ground up that I can't change. But what I can change is that path of my hip and my torso moving, as well as how much I maintain that spinal position. Quick note, first rep in the deadlift is by far and away the most important. Two reasons. One, that's the part that is hardest because we don't have any momentum. And then two, it's the one that we're most risk. So when we set up wise, you want to think immediately in your mind, first rep is the most important. And what that does is create momentum throughout the rest of the set. The other part is you want to avoid using the rubber or the ground to create energy. You want to use muscular energy, not kinetic energy from bouncing the bar off the ground. And I know that probably seems like, yeah, all well and good. I appreciate the sentiment because now I'm doing 64 reps done as quickly as possible in this density-based strategy. But my point being is when we start to compromise our position or technique and we create momentum, that's when we see risk go up. So much like the first rep, most important rep from a potential for the rest of the set as well as risk. Same thing of using kinetic energy by bouncing. Now we're lifting a weight that we probably shouldn't be lifting because we can't do it without utilizing some sort of technique. So setup wise, you want to think about this just like a squat, right? So feet about hip width to shoulder width apart, wherever is a comfortable stance where you can simultaneously bend the ankle, knee, and hip. From there, when we set up, we want to rotate our thumbs into that trap bar, pull our chin to the back of our neck. Now what this does is braces that spine, right? There's a concept called centration or packing a joint. So I start to rotate my thumbs into that bar. I pull the chin to the back of my neck and really create pressure in that cervical spine. What do we have control over when we're under heavy load or moving? Probably not a whole lot, but our feet, our hands, and where our eyes are going to make a huge impact on our ability to control when it gets to that threshold, whether it's fatigue or intensity. So I start to break down what do I have at my disposal when I'm inevitably going to get to that point, and that's kind of the point. I have my hands, I can rotate my thumbs in that bar, which packs that shoulder, pulls my shoulder blade down. I have my eyes, I can pull the eyes back, I can pull my chin back and create tension in my neck, which is going to stabilize my entire spine. And then I have my feet. Same thing I'm doing with my thumbs, I'm rotating out. We want to pull the ground apart without actually moving. So right now I'm activating my glutes by rotating my feet out. It's a mechanism called a corkscrew. It creates tension in that hip, and now I create more tension all the way through and stabilize that spine. So when I set up wise, hands, feet, eyes, rotating my thumbs into the bar, pulling my top part of my foot out away from each other, pulling my chin back to the back of my neck, stand on up, down, control to the ground. There. As you get under fatigue, you'll see eventually this, or you'll see that round. If you feel like the butt is lifting, or if you feel like your torso is losing position, get longer pause on the ground, reset, rotate thumbs, pack the neck, rotate your feet out, create more stability. Because as we start to make our way through these challenging sets into that second half, set 5, 6, 7, and 8, we start to see these things that weren't there in the first four because now we have more fatigue. And that's the other interesting thing about trap bar deadlift. It's going to be a lot more global fatigue, and this heart rate elevated, building up a whole body acidity. We start to find interesting phenomena happen from the technique, and that takes away from the safety, it takes away from the ultimate performance or the impact from the program. All right, strength practice 1. We're going to do 6 sets of 3 of front foot elevated split squat. Front foot elevated split squat is a foundational lift for a strength program. What does that mean? It means it's our anchor for the other exercises to work off of. So if we look at it as a keystone piece to what we're doing, the development of this becomes more and more important. And we like to focus our training blocks around it. So if we look at a calendar year, 13 blocks within a 52-week year, we're going to think about, hey, how do we want to get a front foot elevated split squat 3 to 4 cycles, meaning we're going to do an accumulation block and an intensification block every year. And why is this important? One, it facilitates this knee dominant quad exercise that if we can get that really good, we see a lot of things positive happen. One, people are moving better. It's pretty fun to have that happen. When people are moving better, they generally are performing better. We see a lot of other things happen, right? We see total body development. We see concurrent development in fitness, body comp, relative strength. And these are our holy grail of what we're trying to do with all of our customers and our clients. And then the final part is it transfers. It transfers to locomotive patterns like walking, running, jogging, whatever it is you like to do, because it teaches us how to absorb, decelerate, and then recover. Now, where does that translate into things like squatting patterns? Generally speaking, if we can't squat, probably go back up to some sort of root cause, whether it's asymmetry or some sort of length tension or some sort of motor pattern is just simply not there. Chances are that we're going to have a lot more opportunity from a split squat. And what that opportunity gives us is an opportunity to load faster, get more intensity, get more volume, get more. And then the other part is it gives us the potential to probably squat more effectively down the road and get more from that exercise. So on our first practice of our training cycle, we always like to focus on some sort of split squat variation. In this case, it's going to be a front foot elevated split squat. Couple of big cues. One, we want to be on train tracks, not tight ropes. So we set up wise, we want to look at our feet about shoulder width apart. And what that does, it gives me balance. Now, when we're a little bit wider with that stance, you tend to see people get their weight on their big toe and not their whole back 5 toes. So when I set up wise, we want all 5 of our toes pressing into the ground. Pinky toe to big toe. And that gets us into this really good stable position, but it makes sure that we're going in this sagittal or linear plane. The second cue is escalator, not elevator. The motion is down and forward. If you remember someone standing behind like a pony wall and they start to go down in Austin Powers, think about that your body's descending down as they go forward. You're going down an escalator. So if I put a wall right here and I was standing there, your body should gradually disappear as you go down. Now, from a technical perspective, front foot is glued to the ground. That shin or that tibia is going to move forward. Your stop point is not parallel, below parallel. It's when you can't get any more surface on that calf and hamstring together, that I've closed this gap to a point where there's no more else to go. That is our end point. And we want to do that with our back leg long, our knee pulled away from the ground, our torso vertical. One of the keys behind any squat pattern that we'll always talk about is we want a perpendicular torso to the ground, and then we want to get our thigh as below parallel as possible. So those two divergent paths, staying perpendicular and then gradually getting less and less parallel. Then we start to look at a very interesting phenomenon. I'm targeting, isolating, and creating stress in a specific area. And when I start to get to that end range, we get a compounding effect. We can do effectively, we get more from the things that we're doing just anyway. So range of motion, load, position. Grab on 2 dumbbells. It's 3 reps, so big cue is as the reps go down, the weight goes up correspondingly. Train tracks, not tightrope. Escalator as I go down, chest is up, back leg is off the ground. We're going to add a tempo here, so we'll get down, hamstring down to the calf, 4, 3, 2, 1, push back up. We're going to do 3 reps each leg with that same pause in the bottom position for 6 sets. Let's move on to practice 2. For practice 2, we have a 3-point stance dumbbell row. 3-point stance is a very stable position, and that's intentional because the weight's going to go up significantly. Now, as we set up here, we want to think I'm anchoring my body to get as much leverage to pull a heavy as possible dumbbell as possible without leaning, shifting, or rotating. So in our stance, Think about it like you're setting up for your RDL, which we'll go through in practice 3. Feet are going to be hip width apart. Soft knees, not completely bent, not super locked, soft, and this creates stability. From here, I hinge at the waist by pushing my butt back, shins back, bringing my torso to the ground till I get one hand in contact with the bench. This one I do want to lock out. I want to have a strong base position here. So I want to be bone, and then I want to be strong in that shoulder. Think about if I was going to take a punch, I want to absorb. I want to have a strong position by having this shoulder rotated out, that elbow locked, that chin tucked, that shoulder blade packed. And now I have a foundation to grab onto a dumbbell that is normally heavier than I can normally lift because I'm in a really good position. This makes all the difference in the world. If I have maybe an overly bent knee or a rounded back or a loose shoulder, I am essentially dissipating force into that dumbbell and I'm losing the opportunity to train that movement pattern as effectively as I can. Setup makes all the difference. So feet, hips, hand, really make sure that you're set up before you grab that dumbbell. Now, when we set up on that dumbbell, we want to maintain this position. I want to make whatever adjustment I have. Take a second to recalibrate. So now I'm really organized here. From here, the movement's going to pull up and out, trying to get that elbow up above the rib cage as much as possible. Now, if I can get that elbow higher without rotating, that is going to create more stress into that lat as opposed to somewhere else. I'm basically just trying to find some sort of leverage or mechanical advantage to be able to get that dumbbell a little bit higher. Pull that shoulder or that elbow as far back as possible, getting that elbow clearing your lat so you can get as much stress in that area as possible without leaning, shifting, or adjusting. And now, the way you can tell is if you transition your weight, you'll start to feel this knee go in and that inside shade of that opposite foot cave. You'll start to feel like your sight line is opening. You don't want to work to center yourself as you start to grow. You want to think, my eye line's here, my feet are equally heavy, I pull that dumbbell up as high as I can without leaning, shifting, or rotating. So weight on both feet, hand, centering our body as I pull that dumbbell up as high as I can. You're going to be in a really good position to get the most from that actual row. Let's move on to practice 3. For practice 3, we're going to do an RDL for 6 sets of 3. Remember, the weight goes up when the reps goes down, so you should be able to grab some fairly heavy dumbbells during this training block. Now, setup-wise in RDL, feet are going to be hip width apart, toes pointed straight ahead. And this allows us to corkscrew the ground. So as I'm in this position, I'm creating tension in my glutes and my back by rotating my shins and my feet outward without actually physically moving. So I'm trying to tear the ground in half. The other part, soft knees. So when I set up here, we don't want to be locked. We want to have a semi-bent knee, not a lot. And what this allows us to do is stack our joints. So as I start to create pressure in my hamstring, I'm not loading the segments that are bone on bone, right? My spine has this natural curvature. We want to think about that same thing in terms of our knee. It's a Euler's law. So as I start to create natural curves, we create tension and compression in the right joints or the right actual muscle groups. In this case, trying to target the hamstrings. And that goes into where are we stressing? We want to train movements, not muscles, but the same token, the muscles that we're trying to target need to be isolated and controlled by the movements that we do. So we're set up wise, feet hip width apart, soft knees, and that's encouraging. Okay, now my setup for my shin down is really organizing myself to get as much tension in that hamstring. So when we get down into that position, above the actual belt is equally as important as below the belt. So when I look at this belt line, if I have a rounded back, if I look at I'm reaching my dumbbells, I'm effectively taking stress away from my hamstring. There's a balance, there's a coordination, there's a stability component, but the end result is saying, okay, when I wake up tomorrow morning after I go through 18 heavy reps of RDL for 6 sets of 3 with a 4-count pause on the bottom, where do I feel soreness? If I feel it here, if I feel it here, not good. It means we had a bad setup and bad execution. That should be a a signifier of the stress that I did based off the exercises I chose with the execution of those exercises that I had that gets me the outcome. And we are essentially triangulating stress over the course of 3 training days between practice 1, practice 2, practice 2, practice 3 over the course of 4 weeks. And we should have okay, I know what I did yesterday. And that should leave some sort of residual in terms of improved performance based off of not having altered length tension, altered function. So grab on to 2 heavy ass dumbbells, feet hip width apart, chin tucked, back flat, corkscrewing the ground. So I'm trying to pull the ground apart with my feet. My shins are rotating out, my hips are rotating out. Now from here, we're going to go down to an end range. What is a good end range? It's a great question. Thank you for asking. So the end range I have is as low as I can go without bending my knee or losing my back position. That could be bottom part of your shin. That could be the bottom part of your knee. That could be the top part of your knee. We want to have as much range as humanly possible without compromising our spine or knee position. So we want a vertical, if not posterior translated chin. We want a long, flat spine with our chin tucked and our shoulder blades retracted at a natural curve. We want our butt going back, and as low as that can go, the better. Let's move on to practice 4. For practice 4, we're going to work just good old-fashioned bench press. Now, before I go into bench press, I want to go through an important note or a service announcement. This is the most important exercise we do, bar none. There is no disputing this, that the people that come to Allegiate are there to improve their bench press. There's nothing else that matters. And you might argue, I don't really care about bench press. You just don't know yet. Justin Thompson and I have had very long conversations about this is the ultimate expression of athleticism. That the more you can bench, the better you are at everything. So when you're going through bench press and you're doing 8 reps of 8, and just getting throttled with 64 reps done as quickly as possible, just remember, this will be the answer to all of your problems. There's no problem that bench press can't solve. Throughout history, this is proven. So as we're going through our protocol here, and you're really feeling it, you're feeling tired, you're feeling like, what's the point? Just remind yourself, this is the lock and key to making your life as meaningful, as purposeful as possible. But there's no other answer available to us that's cleaner and more linear than bench press. In terms of technique,